Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to discuss the potential for a constitutional crisis which could result from an accidentally or deliberately misplaced vote of confidence in Boris Johnson's leadership. Why actually a leadership challenge might actually suit Boris Johnson's supporters. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So do bear in mind, this is a speculative discussion about what might happen if Boris Johnson faces a confidence vote in his party. I don't know if this is going to happen because it is based on the actions of Tory MPs who will have their own political calculations, and most of them don't seem to understand the political system with which they are existing in. But it is just that it could trigger a major constitutional crisis, and if it goes badly. So right now, several more Tory MPs have publicly stated that they've submitted letters of no confidence in Boris Johnson's leadership. You know, since the Sue Gray report, there's been a steady trickle. So according to some bean count in the media, I think it means there are now 22, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's 22 Tory MPs who have publicly stated that they've submitted letters and haven't withdrawn them. I don't think that includes Douglas Ross, because he did say he submitted a letter, but then he withdrew it. There have also been a few Tory MPs who said that Johnson should quit, but they haven't said they've submitted letters. You would also imagine some Tory MPs may have submitted a letter but not publicly stated it. For example, one Tory MP in the last week has said that they have submitted a letter, but they said that they submitted their letter months ago. They've only just now confirmed it. In other words, we may slowly drip towards the 54 or maybe 53 letters, because there's been a few Tory MPs disgracing themselves. It may only be 53 letters now, I haven't counted. But the number required to trigger a confidence vote. What happens then is anybody's guess. It might be that although there are lots of Tory MPs who don't want to submit letters for fear of being found out, because although in theory it's anonymous, someone can still see you submitting the letter. So it might be that there's a load of them who don't want to put the letter in, but that they will vote Johnson out of office in a completely anonymous vote, and that would be it, it'd be gone. But it's also possible that the majority of Tory MPs really do not know that getting rid of Johnson is a good move right now, and they might back him. I have no idea which is more likely, because like I say, it's down to the individual judgment of a load of MPs, most of whom are not necessarily all that politically astute. But I'm going to look at the outcome whereby the next few weeks sees the 54, 53, whatever letters reached, a confidence vote issued, but that Johnson wins that vote. So the Conservative Party rules state that there cannot be another confidence vote for 12 months. So Boris Johnson will be free from challenge for a full year. Granted, Tory MPs could vote to change the rules, as they threatened to do with Theresa May if she didn't step down voluntarily, but I'll assume that either they wouldn't or that they couldn't do it in time. But I will come to that later on. So here's where it could get sticky. The Privileges Committee is about to clear their desk, so they are due to start investigating whether or not Boris Johnson lied to Parliament. They're not quite ready to do it yet. They need to vote for a new member to replace the current chair, Labour MP Chris Bryant. He recused himself of the investigation into Boris Johnson on the basis that he's a very vocal critic of the Prime Minister's lies. The committee will also need to elect a new chair for the investigation. Now, I don't know how long that process will take. Bear in mind, Parliament's buggered off on recess again. We might be talking 5 or 6 months before the whole thing comes to a conclusion. Remember, they are investigating whether or not Boris Johnson deliberately misled the House on 4 specific occasions. As an aside, there's a lot going around about his rewriting of the ministerial code at the moment. It appeared at first that he'd changed it so the minister doesn't have to resign if they lie to Parliament, because one of the sections that covered that was just removed completely. And I confess to having got caught up in it myself. However, it seems to be not quite the case. The code has been rewritten, but it is still a resigning offence to mislead Parliament. That being said, it is completely understandable that when a Prime Minister who has not only broken the code themselves, but allowed his ministers to do likewise, rewrites the ministerial code, of course you're going to get a lot of people becoming incredibly suspicious. It was, at the very least, a very stupid thing to do at the current time. However, from what I can see, there isn't an immediate need to panic right now. The code has been edited. It still pretty much says the same things as far as the code has any practical application, which with a dishonest Prime Minister, it basically doesn't anyway. But that aside, let us say that the Privileges Committee does find that Johnson deliberately misled the House of Commons. Serious offence, and would require a serious sanction. That sanction would have to be at least 10 days suspension from the House. There's no speculation about that. It has to be. They have issued suspensions greater than that for lesser offences. Now, the committee doesn't actually impose sanctions. It only recommends them. MPs have to vote to approve the sanction. So here are your two possibilities. First, that Tory MPs vote against the sanction. Now, you may imagine, well, of course they're going to do that, Phil. However, those same MPs could have voted against the investigation taking place in the first place. They didn't. Why not? Because they were sick of being made to look like toadies to corrupt dictators amongst their constituents. I am seeing constant reports of Tory MPs getting told on the streets and being written to by people who identify as Conservative voters that they are sick of Boris Johnson. Little aside, because a lot of Conservative voters are doing this, if you have not written to your Tory MP about this, now's the time. Your voice will add to the pressure. But the point is, it would have been less damaging for them to vote down the investigation and dismiss it as party political than it would be to vote down the punishment once a mostly Conservative MP-led inquiry finds him guilty. Because they can't dismiss that as party political because, 4 of the 7-member committee will be Tory MPs. So as such, although you can never rule out anything in politics, it seems ridiculously unlikely that Tory MPs would vote against the sanction. A lot of them might abstain, not wanting to get their hands dirty at all. But that works too if it's enough of them. So then there's the second outcome, and the most likely, is that MPs vote in favour of the sanction. That means Boris Johnson will be suspended from the House. Now, this is already embarrassing. The Prime Minister is not allowed to attend the House of Commons. Dominic Raab would have to lead PMQs because the Prime Minister would be unavailable, not because he's on a foreign trip or because he's ill, but because he's suspended. That in itself is a bit of a constitutional boo-boo, but that's not the real crisis. The real crisis is still to come. With Johnson suspended for at least 10 days, his constituents could sign a recall petition. This would easily pass because in actual fact, it's not a very comfortable Tory seat. So now Boris Johnson isn't even an MP. That's it. That's what the recall petition does. You're sacked as an MP. His suspension has in effect become permanent. Now, Boris Johnson could stand in the by-election. There's a very good chance he would lose it. But it would also take time to arrange that by-election, like 6 to 7 weeks. In the meantime, we have a Prime Minister who is not an elected Member of Parliament. Now, the Constitution does allow for this. We can have an unelected Prime Minister, but it's not the convention these days. We don't do that. Under these circumstances, Johnson can't carry on. The outcry from the public would be immense. But Boris Johnson may not resign. So Tory MPs would then have to get rid of him forcibly. But they can't because they triggered a confidence vote which Johnson won. A major crisis whereby the Prime Minister was not elected, cannot be held accountable by the House because he's not even a member. Politics would get very interesting. Yes, the Prime Minister will still attend the House of Commons, but effectively as a guest. The Tories would need to resolve it very quickly. In fact, actually, although I say the Constitution does allow for an unelected Prime Minister, they are supposed to be in the House of Lords, though. You're not supposed to just have any old Tom, Dick or Harry as Prime Minister. Do you know what? This is going to get into unprecedented territory, and I won't even know the answers to everything. But ultimately, you would need the Tory party to resolve it really quickly. Now, because this is unprecedented, as I've just said, I cannot be clear as to exactly what their options are. But two obvious ones spring to mind. First, they very quickly changed their party rules to allow for another confidence vote within the 12-month period. I don't know how quickly this can be arranged. If it would take several weeks to go through the procedure of both the rule change and the vote itself, and you can easily see that, you can't just do this overnight. There'll be committees, there'll be all sorts of stages to it. I don't know how the internal party workings are, but it'll take several weeks, surely. And in that time, the country can go into meltdown. We also don't know how Boris Johnson would behave. Remember how Trump tried to cling on to power? Now, I'm not suggesting Johnson tries to organise a coup, but he may resort to some regrettable action in order to secure his power. The country is already immobilised because the government is focused entirely on saving Big Dog and not actually dealing with anything. Imagine the mess in this outcome. So then second, the quickest way to resolve the crisis, in theory, would be for MPs to have a confidence vote in the Prime Minister. So this wouldn't be an internal party matter, this would be a parliamentary matter. It would mean Conservative MPs having to vote against their own party leader. Normally, completely unthinkable. Like, it's one thing to replace the leader internally, that's fine, that's keeping it all in-house. Completely different situation to side with opposition parties. Remember, this motion will be led by Labour to do the same thing. But they may have no choice. But even this isn't straightforward, because a parliamentary confidence vote doesn't replace the Prime Minister. It just puts them on notice for 2 weeks. What would happen is that MPs would have to agree on a new Prime Minister to replace him, or a general election will be triggered. In the meantime, Boris Johnson's still Prime Minister. So Conservative MPs would have to get behind a single candidate for Prime Minister without having a party leadership contest. They could do it on the basis that this is an interim Prime Minister while they sort out the party leadership contest, which, bear in mind, they cannot carry out because at this time, Boris Johnson would still be Conservative Party leader. Parliament doesn't vote on party leaders. Boris Johnson is still the Conservative Party leader at this point. This route wouldn't change that. And because opposition MPs would vote for their own leaders, Labour would vote for Keir Starmer, the Lib Dems would vote for Ed Davey and so on, you'd need almost all Tory MPs to agree on a single candidate. Because you would need, for a new Prime Minister to emerge, you need in excess of 320 odd to vote to support one candidate. With the various factions within the Tory party being as they are, that is probably unlikely. The ERG would relish the chaos, I would imagine. So if they can't get behind one, if Tory MPs try to deal with Johnson internally, and they go down the party route and changing the rules, there'll be weeks of chaos that may completely destroy their reputation in public. That'll be it, completely ruined. But if they go for the quicker option of a parliamentary confidence vote, the likely outcome of that is a general election being called in 2 weeks later. Because if Tory MPs cannot agree on a single candidate to take over while they sort out their internal party issues. In conclusion, although a lot of people are waiting with bated breath to see if the number of letters for a confidence vote reaches the 54, or maybe 53 now required, if it's triggered and Johnson wins it, we could be headed for a massive constitutional roller coaster later this year. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. Maybe even click on the join button if you've been interested in memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.